The notion of context has been important, and somebody actually used that very example that different people feeling bits of the elephant, and somebody saying, well, it's a wall, and another person saying it's a tree, and somebody else saying it's a snake, and so on. So in a sense, what they were getting at was that the context supplies little bits of perspectives, and sometimes we need to be able to put the whole of those perspectives together to get the true image. So we don't know it's an elephant until we all put together all of the various bits that each of us has seen. So in a sense, the whole of the truth comes about by us in dialogue and putting things together. So context, I think, is really vital. I mean, you can quite easily distort, say in a news article, something without a context. I mean, you quite often see, and you see this on television more than I think in the print media, where there'll be an interview with someone, but you only see one side of an interview. So you get this view, for instance, say somebody, I can't think of a specific example that I have seen, where somebody is being interviewed and you get a story about whatever it is, perhaps that somebody's been chopping down rainforests and things like this. And the impression you get from seeing that is, gee, this is really bad, this is terrible, how could anybody be doing these evil things? But you're only getting one side, you're not getting it in a context. So the context is important, and this isn't just getting some guy who is chopping down rainforests coming in and from a PR perspective saying, well, of course we have to chop down this because whatever the reason is, we're saving jobs or we're saving something else. It is a matter of a context.
But the medium,
I think that's important.
Thank you, John. But the medium, does it really allow for this context? I mean, we were talking before about the small business of media or the sensationalist titles. Do we really have a place to give context, or is that in the op-ed, or where does this context belong?
Context is the domain of the feature writer. One of my favourite classes to teach is feature writing, because it's all about context. It's all about going deeply into the background and surrounding issues, and indeed it's one of the classes that I suspect many of my students, well, in fact most of my students enjoy the most in the degree, is that more leisurely sort of studied kind of journalism, when you get to write those lengthy feature stories.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Andrew, what would you...
Yeah, one of the things that most frustrated me when I was a newspaper reporter, and I was for 16 years before I worked at the ABC, was that I always had the space to cover the basics: who, what, when, where, how. They never had the space to cover the why. And without answering why an event occurred, why a person behaved in a particular way, there was a huge deficiency in what you were explaining to the audience. Now, sometimes to the readers or to the listeners, I don't really do a news program now. I do a program of analysis where I interview a lot of experts. That's all we do now, is explain, because I don't, in 28 minutes, with myself as the sole presenter, producer, I have an excellent person who assists me for 2 days a week. But with the limited resources, I only can do the why. I have to leave it to others pretty much to establish the basic facts and start to answer some of the unanswered questions. But it was always a great frustration, because the why gave you the context. And and I see, with the sort of neoliberal economic pressures that exist in media organisations now, increasingly less time for the why of a story. because it requires time, it requires airtime, it requires, well, forget about newsprint, sadly. I lament that, but it basically requires more effort, more time, and that is increasingly difficult when journalists are filing 3 and 4 stories a day and then updating the same story 3 and 4 times. My wife still works in that, and she's an outstanding journalist who's broken many stories in education, child protection, healthcare, and she's very experienced. But I see her daily work pattern change, and she's constantly updating stories, including at 10 o'clock at night.